No life forms here. Wampa!
New Hot Wampa, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo in hot outfits, each sold separately.
I'll look higher. Wampa! Wampa! R2-D2, use your sensor scope. I can't find Luke. Hey, you big fur coat. Try me on for size. Wampa, 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 Wampa. Thanks, Han. And you too, R2. Oh.
New Hot Wampa, R2-D2 with sensor scope and other action figures, each sold separately from Kenner's Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back collection.
Hi, this is Mark from Hot Wampa. I'm here today with Guy Trussell. You might have seen recently a picture of his awesome collection of Star Wars figures. Guy, when did you start collecting?
Hello, Mark. Well, I guess you could say I've been collecting Star Wars figures for my whole life, you could say. There's a bit of a story behind it. Do you want me to fill you in? Okay. Well, I was born in 1979. I'm 37 years old now. So I was born after the first Star Wars film came out. But I have an older brother. He's 46 or 47 now. And during the time of the release of all the original Star Wars movies, our auntie, who was a few years younger than my mum, so she was in her 20s when we were born, early 20s, she actually worked in Hamleys in London.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, what was then classed as the largest toy shop in the world. And she worked in the Star Wars department. So she worked on the floor, probably the busiest department in Hamleys, selling Star Wars figures to all of the children. And back then, she was living in a village outside of Hitchin in Hertfordshire, and she was travelling into London, King's Cross every day. And at the time, in the sort of early 80s, sort of late 70s, early 80s, when I came along, my mum was off work and with me, and she used to give my auntie a lift home from the station. So she used to get off the train from London, get to the bus stop, and then give her a lift home to the village. Now, as a token of her appreciation, my auntie used to give my mum to give to me and my brother the loose Star Wars figures that had been taken out by the children in Hamleys. So in the blister packs, as you imagine, all these little kids want to play with all the toys but can't, so they used to rip them out of the blister packs, play with them, get told off by the mum, get told off by someone on the shop floor. But these toys were meant for the bin, and the bin they used to go. Now, the people who worked in the department, they were allowed to take these toys home, because they weren't any use to Hamleys anymore, because they weren't resellable. So my auntie used to give me and my brother the loose figures that were deemed for the bin, that were taken out of the packet in Hamleys. So that's really how our collection started. We never used to really have many weapons growing up, because it used to be really just the figures that she used to manage to salvage. But that's really how we started, really. I mean, the toys first came out, if you knew, early 1978. So they sort of came out from then, and then as the films came out, so when Empire came out in 80, Return of the Jedi in 83, that's sort of, she was still working there then, and exactly the same thing happened, that she would bring these toys home for us, and that's how we started collecting, my brother and I.
Well, I was reading that after each of the films came out, the revenue was like $100 million just in figures alone, from 78 onwards.
Yeah. I read a figure before our interview. I did a little bit of background reading just in case you did try and sort of put me on the spot. Yeah, 250 million figures were sold, were produced by Kenner and sold, and some, a lot of them are still in distribution, the second-hand distribution market now.
Yeah, very popular market, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it is very, 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 very popular, very, very... I mean, like a lot of people my age, your age, sort of want to sort of get the, chase the childhood dream again, get all the old nostalgia back, really.
I can remember myself. I was born in 75, so, okay. Too young really to remember the first Star Wars. I can remember Empire and Return of the Jedi. I think I probably saw Return of the Jedi in the cinema.
Yeah.
I remember I had an auntie and uncle who lived in Muswell Hill.
Okay.
And I think my mum and dad gave me £10 as spending money, which was quite a lot back then. And my uncle took me to Selfridges on Oxford Street, And I remember buying Low Grey, the Ewok, for like £1.50, I think it was. So you know, now it doesn't seem that much, but you know, back then it was quite expensive.
Yeah. Funny you should say about him, because there's quite a few Facebook groups, sort of collectors groups, and Low Grey is actually one that there's a guy on there who's got about, I don't know, he's got a few hundred of that Ewok still on blister, like what they say, you know, mint on card, but they're not really mint, but still on card.
Yeah.
Of someone that was working for a toy shop or something in the 70s, and he got a big shipment of that Ewok, and they stayed in an attic or a loft or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, they're all still out there in many different guises, whether, you know, it's played with figures, which is what I collect. I just collect the loose, really.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, you know, there's different grades when it goes to it, you know, collecting all the way up to sort of minting box and everything like that, you know.
Do you solely collect the original trilogy figures?
Yeah. I mean, I sort of said that I've been collecting my whole life. I mean, that's true in the way as when I started, but I only really got back into completing my collection about 5 years old when my son was born.
Yeah.
I've got a son. He's 5 in Easter, and I sort of wanted, you know, when you sort of have a child, you sort of think I wanted him to sort of follow the way of the Force as much as he could, and I started to sort of collect, you know, finish off the collection that I had growing up, really. After the Star Wars films came out, and you know, you get to the age when you sort of stop playing with the toys as much as you do. New things came out. I remember sort of being at school and being interested in Thundercats and then the Turtles and things like that.
Yeah.
And all my Star Wars toys really ended up in a box in my mum's loft, and that's where they stayed until about 5 years ago. Really, about 5 years. Yeah, I mean, just after he was born. So, you know, less than 5 years ago actually. I went up into my mum's loft to see what I was dealing with, see what I had left, and I thought I wasn't too sure how many figures I had left. I had a lot less than I had when I was younger. My auntie, who worked in Hamleys, she's actually had her own children. She left Hamleys to go on maternity leave about 1985, when my first cousin was born, and a lot of my figures got given to them. We had sort of a lot of duplicates, especially, and a lot of them went to them. So I had a modest collection. I had, but not as many as I used to have. So I from that point, I really started to collect. What I wanted was a complete full run of all of the loose figures, and it didn't really matter to me what condition they were in. I wasn't really bothered at the time about having weapons, because, like I said, we never really had weapons as kids, and I just wanted a complete run of each figure, really, just to sort of, I mean, I was reliving my childhood again through him in a way, collecting with him.
Well, it's a nice legacy, isn't it, to leave, you know, for your son in the future. I read that, like you said, about 1985, that was the time that they discontinued the action figures, wasn't it, the Kenner range?
I mean, after Jedi came out, and there wasn't really any George Lucas wasn't given any indication that there were going to be any more Star Wars films coming out. The last line they produced was called the Power of the Force range in 1985, which was a short run of figures, a combination of the last Ewoks and other figures from the Star Wars films that hadn't been produced. Went on to be called the Power of the Force, but otherwise known these days as the Last 17. So a lot of the collectors either collect what's known as the Last 17, or they choose not to. I've completed a run of the Last 17. They are seen by many as the hardest to find, and when they become hard to find and rarer, that's when you sort of make the move up to sort of £2-3 a figure, up to you know, an infinite price, and the price of those is still going up. So yeah, the Power of the Force range, that's when they stopped producing. As far as I know, I mean, I'm not such a sort of a big geek in it to know too much.
No,
I know as much as I know, but I think around 85, when the Power of the Force range, they were the last figures, definitely the last 17.
Yeah, that's right. And I read that Hasbro took over, like I think the Power of the Force 2 range. But these are the guys that were muscular, weren't they? They looked a lot like He-Man figures, really. They were.
Yeah. They had, that's right. They had good muscle tone, definition, banded legs. You know, the legs were sort of like wide, and they just didn't look like the original Kenner line in any way, really.
No, the original Kenner were quite correct anamorphically, weren't they?
Yeah, they were very simple figures, very sort of simple, posable figures with, not a crazy amount of detail. I mean, the detail did vary across the figures, but they weren't so detailed as the figures that today, from today, or like you said, the Power of the Force 2 onwards. Yeah,
I guess that Return of the Jedi must have been the hardest collection. Jabba's palace. There are lots of different figures there. Some of them were really hard to get. I found at the time.
Yeah, I think the ones now, when you look at it now, I mean, when you see what's out there, I mean, when I came to complete my collection, when I started to complete my collection, I wasn't really aware of the Facebook groups that were out there for collectors. So I just initially went to places like eBay and places like that to look. When I started to recollect, I originally didn't want to hand over any money. I didn't want to buy any. I was all up for trades and everything like that. And of course, that doesn't last for very long because you have to sort of put your hand in your pocket to sort of to get some figures. But now that I'm on a few Facebook groups of collectors, like myself, buying and selling, you do find that the Return of the Jedi ones were the ones probably which were in distribution the most.
Yeah.
Now, whether that means it's because it was the most recent film and they were sort of produced more in abundance, that's why they're so readily available, I don't know. But you do definitely see a lot of Jedi figures more and more for the lower price bracket of a couple of quid than you would those maybe from A New Hope. Generally, as a rule, I find it anyway. So I think the Jedi figures are probably the most in abundance, if as it were.
What about, what's your favourite figure?
Favourite figure?
Yeah.
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I had it ready. I think probably my favourite figure is probably the Luke Skywalker in the Stormtrooper outfit, and it is an easy one for me to say because it is one of the rarer figures. But the reason it is my favourite, one, I think he looks pretty cool because it's a combination of two figures, combination of Luke and a Stormtrooper. But also, when it came to the Power of the Force figures coming out, my auntie had already left Hamleys and we'd already stopped collecting first time round, so I wasn't aware of these figures coming out. We didn't have the internet back then, as you know. All you knew really was what were in the toy shops. At the time, I wasn't really looking at Star Wars toys. By that time, I was more interested in other things. But I remember going to Luton Indoor Market when I was about, I would have been in my teens. Yeah. And they had, and I remember going into a comic shop and they had a glass cabinet with all of the Star Wars figures in. And I remember being mesmerised by all of these figures that I'd never seen before, like the Luke Stormtrooper, the Imperial Dignitary, mainly the ones from the last 17 figures. So when it came to collecting them again, I was quite excited about these because it was something I didn't know about. It wasn't a case of me collecting a figure again that I'd lost or given away when I was younger. It was collecting figures that I'd never really seen before and I wasn't even aware of. So I would say, Luke Stormtrooper is my favourite figure from that. From the original film, I'd say maybe probably the Han Solo.
The black and white Han Solo.
Yeah.
I really like the Empire Strike Back Han Solo with the blue jacket and the brown trousers. Yeah. That was a nice one. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's a good figure.
What about the most difficult to find?
Difficult to find. They're all out there, basically.
Yeah.
It all depends how much you want to spend on them. Now, the last couple of figures that I got, the last one that I bought, which did complete, which was like the icing on the collection for me, or the cherry on the top, was the blue Snaggletooth, which many say is the sort of the rarest figure. It's a bit of an anomaly when it comes to a figure. So that was probably the last one I bought. I got that from the States. I think probably it was about the beginning of last year, beginning of 2016. I managed to find one in a bit, in a played with condition. Yeah, quite a played with condition, but it was a good price compared to what you can get over here at the time. So I guess that was, in that way, it was. Yeah, I guess that was a hardest one to get, I suppose, really.
Because that Snaggletooth was, I think George Lucas was involved with that actual creation, wasn't he? Because the original had a blue outfit with silver style disco boots, and it's about the size of Luke and Han. But on George Lucas' request, they actually subsequently corrected the size and made it more like it was in the film. Yeah,
he was part of the Cantina playset. He was part of one of the 4 figures that you got on the Cantina playset, along with God, you got me now. Greedo, Hammerhead, and let me have a little. I can't remember who the last one was. There was another one. I'll think of it. Walrus Man. And the Cantina playset was released in Sears in the United States, in the shop Sears, and Kenner didn't really have much to go on when it came to looks-wise about what he actually looked like, and he was released in that Cantina playset, the blue, like 3.5-inch figure, like your other size figures. But when it came to the film coming out, got to realise that he was actually meant to be red instead of blue, and he was quite a short figure. He was sort of Ewok size compared to the big one. So he got recalled. I think he got recalled. And that's why there aren't so many in distribution, there aren't so many available on the market in the UK, especially for that reason, because he wasn't how he should have been. So he was replaced with the red one.
I can remember, I mean, I had a lot of figures like yourself. My brother and I used to play with. The one thing I regretted, I didn't have like multiple versions of Stormtroopers and things like that. That would have been great to have like 10 Stormtroopers. But my brother and his mate, my brother and my mate actually, I was away at work one day, and they got the scissors out and they cut the legs off multiple figures, and really done a lot of damage to them. So they were pretty much worthless after that. So.
That's it, yeah.
I really like your display case and the lights and stuff like that. It looks very professional. I'll put a picture on the Facebook page of the Hot Wampa.
I saw. I got 3 likes.
Well, you'll get some more, I'm sure. What about how you see it in the future? I mean, do you think the value will increase, or are you not worried about that? It's just a case of having them.
Well, the way I see it, I mean, I stopped collecting, and I think I got back into it. I think I got back into collecting in quite a good time. I mean, there's never a great time to get into collecting. A bit like buying a house, I guess. I mean, if you buy a house now, it was always cheaper to buy that house 5 or 10 years ago. So, but when I got into it, and when I completed my run, a lot of the more expensive figures are going up and up and up more now. I mean, that probably has a lot of factors. I mean, more and more people getting back into it. The supply and demand, the figures are sort of slowly drying up on the sort of common market. Films coming out, sad news like Princess Leia dying, Carrie Fisher passing. I think that's in one way or another. I've read recently that the price of a basic Leia Organa figure has gone up, I think. So things like that. So I'm not really too. I mean, I keep an eye on the value, of course, but I don't really ever see myself really getting rid of them. They're not my figures at the end of the day. They're my sons and my I've got a daughter, 10-week-old daughter, so I sort of see that going on to them in the future. I don't let my son play with this collection, the one in the cabinet, but once you finish collecting things, you sort of lose that buzz that you get from collecting. So we are actually casually collecting again. So he's 2/3 of the way through himself collecting them, but again, it's got to the point now where you can't really pick up many figures for a certain amount, and you go up into the next price bracket. So I'm not really in a position really to start forking out lots of money on figures for him that he's going to just sort of play with. But that's what they're intended. That's what they're intended for at the end of the day.
Yeah, of course. And he's in a nice position really, because I mean, when you think of like Star Wars Rebels and the Clone Wars cartoons and things that perhaps we had droids, didn't we, and Ewoks when we were young, which weren't that great. But today's sort of stuff for younger viewers is fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's all out there. I mean, he's got his collection of his sort of Star Wars figures. I can see 3 of them on the floor as I'm talking to you at the minute. But he also collects. He likes playing with they're about like tiny little figures. I think they're Hasbro, the new Hasbro figures. They like another line that they do of little ones, tiny little figures. He likes really, really small figures, as well as playing with the the Kenner ones, the originals. But yeah, it's a good time. It's good time to be a child in the.
It is, yeah.
In the universe, or
Guy, can I just ask before we finish up, which Facebook pages would you recommend for collectors?
The biggest one, the biggest one out there, I think, is probably Echo Base. I would say Echo Base UK is probably the busiest one. There's another one called Yavin 4. You can see where they've got the names from. And my friend, one of my mates, Martin Brooks, he runs a page called Vintage Star Wars Show and Sell.
Okay, that's great.
So that's quite That's quite a good one as well.
So we're getting them up on the page as well, and promote them in the metadata for the podcast. So collectors who are infused by what you've just told us can get out there and find some new figures themselves. Some new old figures, as it were.
New old figures, yeah.
New old figures. Okay, well, thanks very much, guys. It's been great to talk to you.
No worries, pleasure, mate.
It's Darth Vader, watch out! And he's got a lightsaber.
It's Kenner's Star Wars action figures, each sold separately.
I got you now, Ben Kenobi.
With R2-D2 and C-3PO. There's even Chewbacca and Han Solo.
Someone's coming, Chewie. Who's there? It's Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker. Now I know the Force is with us.
Darth Vader, R2-D2, C-3PO, and other Kenner Star Wars action figures, each sold separately.